Whenever I go grocery shopping, there are always staples I need more of. Coffee, milk, bread. They're all so standard that I barely notice them on my receipt. But lately, the price of one of them has really stood out. Eggs. In some states, the average price of a dozen eggs is now more than $7. And as you might have seen, this is all because of bird flu, an outbreak that up until this point, not everyone has been paying attention to, but is rapidly spreading. From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Martine Powers. It's Monday, February 10th. Today, I talk with Lena Sun, who covers public health and infectious disease for The Post. She'll explain why the bird flu outbreak has made the price of eggs skyrocket and what all of us should know about how it spreads. Lena, have you bought eggs recently?
I have. And I have been buying eggs normally every week. And I did notice the price went up. And of course, sometimes if you go in the afternoon, there are no more eggs. So this weekend, I went early and I was so thrilled to see that the price of eggs at my store was only $3.49.
Wow.
But they did have a limit on a certain type of the cage-free, these are eggs that have been, massaged and sung to and stuff like all this really fancy bougie eggs. But I know that my neighbor was telling me that she saw eggs for $9 at her grocery store.
Yeah,
right?
that you've seen these prices all over the place.
Yeah. But prices are higher for eggs, and there is going to be a shortage because this is all related to bird flu.
And I think the fact that you're having conversations with your neighbors about, like, where are you getting your eggs? What is the price that you're seeing? I mean, I think that speaks to how big a deal this has gotten for people around the country. But as you said, this is because of bird flu. Tell me a little bit more about this bird flu outbreak that is making these eggs so expensive.
We have to go back a little bit in time. This particular strain of bird flu has been around since 2022, and it's infected a lot of wild birds, migratory waterfowl, migratory birds, many, many species. And the wild birds have infected poultry flocks. They fly overhead, they poop, they pee, their virus gets into poultry barns and flocks. So when this virus hits poultry, it is very lethal. It kills them very quickly. So if you're a farmer, you have to, the word is cull or depopulate. In other words, kill them. And you have to kill all of them.
Your poultry that has been exposed to.
Exposed, right?
Wow.
And so as these farms depopulate their poultry, you don't have any laying hens. They be the ones who give you the eggs. Ergo, prices of eggs are going up.
And in terms of where we're seeing these outbreaks, where in the country?
The USDA has this map that shows all the detections in wild birds since January 1 of 2022. I am looking at the map. Every single state, Oregon, 538, Texas, 369, and this is not even the most up-to-date map. So in other words, we're talking thousands of cases just looking at this point in time.
Wow. Obviously, we're talking about birds here, chickens who have been infected with this form of influenza. But isn't it like non-birds are also getting bird flu? Or it's not just avian species, correct?
Correct. So that's why people don't quite understand. It is avian influenza, but H5N1, this particular bad guy, has infected dairy cows. And last year, it was the first time we had seen it in dairy cows. It has infected a lot of mammalian species. But when it jumped into dairy cows last year, everybody kind of sat up. Epidemiologists were like, whoa, hairs on my arm up. Because dairy cows are domestic animals, right? And people have a lot of interaction with domestic animals.
Of course, yeah.
So now,
and we're drinking dairy milk.
And we're drinking dairy milk. The virus has been found in the milk of these dairy cows. Milk that is pasteurized, heated at high temperatures for a certain amount of time. inactivates the virus. But what's happened now is that you have seen as this virus has torn through dairy herds. Over 950 dairy herds in 16 states have been infected. And, herds range from, 200 cows to thousands and thousands of cows. So the reason why people are worried is, think of the virus this way. It has been going to the gym and training to get better at breaking and entering.
Oh, no.
It's good at breaking and entering into bird cells. Now it's getting better at entering other mammalian species.
Well, then that leads to the question of people, right? Like, can humans get bird flu?
Yes. And so in the United States, we have at least 67 confirmed cases of H5N1 in humans. Most of these people have been farm workers who are close up with the cows. And I spent some time on a dairy farm last summer, and you see when they're milking the cows come into the milking parlor, and the dairy workers is attaching a contraption to the cow's udder. Mm-hmm. But before they attach the contraption that automatically squeezes all the milk out, here I am, I'm doing this thing, right?
Lena's doing a lot of squeezing with her very vivid depiction of what it's like to
Too bad there's no video
milk
here.
A cow.
They squeeze the teats to make sure to sort of express the milk, right?
Yeah.
The milk is splashing all over.
Yeah.
It gets in your eyes or you're breathing it in. So a lot of farm workers have been sick in that way. And also some people who are the people who go cull and kill the poultry, you got feathers flying around.
Yeah, that they're also exposed.
They're also exposed.
And for someone who gets bird flu, what does that mean? I mean, how serious is it? Could it kill people?
So luckily, so far in the United States, almost all of the cases that we've seen confirmed is mild symptoms. Conjunctivitis, the pink eye, and very mild, maybe respiratory. And that's been good, knock on wood. But there was a man in Louisiana whose death was reported in January. He was the first person to be confirmed bird flu death in the United States. Wow. This person was over 65. He also had underlying medical conditions, and he also had a backyard flock that was sick and infected. And so exposure was that way. But more concerning is there was a case of a teenager in Canada, a 13-year-old girl. She was hospitalized for over 2 months, and she had the most intensive emergency care to keep her alive, and she survived. And we still don't know how she was exposed. She was not on a farm. The family says that they were not, exposed to wild birds, at least what the doctor said. So that raises the question, how did this kid get infected?
Yeah.
Because we don't really know how this virus really spreads.
Well, that leads me back to eggs. And I just want to ask, is there any chance that when I go to buy eggs at the grocery store that they could have bird flu, or I could get bird flu from the eggs?
No, you can't get bird flu from eggs because, as we know, once the poultry flock is infected, just a couple chickens die. They have to kill all the chickens, including the laying hens, right? So if you have no laying hens, they cannot produce eggs. So any eggs that are coming into the market are from healthy hens, right? So, and we're also cooking the eggs, right? Same for chicken. Somebody asked me the other day, is it safe to eat chicken? Well, you should always cook your chicken to the right temperature. Mm-hmm. If the chicken has made it to market, it's a healthy chicken. They're not recycling these dead chickens that have been infected with bird flu.
Of course, yeah.
So yes. And milk, do not be drinking any raw milk or eating any products made with raw milk. Because in addition to the dairy cows and in addition to the poultry, there have been cases of domestic pets, cats and dogs, dying because they've eaten contaminated food or drunk the raw milk that's infected with the H5.
After the break, we talk about what's being done to stop the spread and whether consumers can expect the price of eggs to drop anytime soon. We'll be right back.
I'm Carol Lenig. I'm an investigative reporter at The Washington Post. My basic assignment is to help readers understand complex government policies and government officials' claims and figure out if they're getting the true story. We work to expose what's hidden and what powerful people want to keep hidden. We dig deep to reveal what's true, and readers don't have time to do that. Only we can bring to you the reality of how a Medicare program is repeatedly failing. Only we can dig in and figure out that somebody who's nominated for a really important job made up a big part of his resume. Subscriptions support this work. I'm Carol Lenig, and I'm one of the people behind the Post.
So in terms of the impact that this is having on our economy, I mean, we talked about how prices have gone up, but things have started to get a little bonkers. I mean, I want to talk about that incident in Pennsylvania last week where someone stole 100,000 eggs from a facility there, that you're seeing like this kind of rabid hoarding of eggs, and people are starting to get very freaked out. Can you just talk a little bit about the extent of this egg shortage problem right now and what that type of panicked hoarding of resources says about the current situation?
Egg prices, I think, are something that people pay attention to because it's a staple for so many people. And I think it's a staple, especially for people who use eggs as a cheaper substitute of protein if you can't afford to buy other things. I know myself, I'm a baker, and I'm thinking, maybe I will look for a recipe that does not call for 5 eggs and 2 egg yolks. But this is going to ripple through. And one of the largest egg farms, I think, announced the other day that they were affected. And they have to kill all of their stock. And it takes time to have these grown up again. And eventually, I think they will get to be more eggs. But talking to experts, egg prices are going to continue to be high, which will make people scramble to hoard a lot of eggs.
How has the Trump administration responded to this outbreak?
Well, first of all, they've been silent, and they've been particularly silent in not allowing the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, to put out studies about the bird flu. For example, the CDC publishes these weekly reports. They're known as the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, MMWRs.
And what does that mean? Like, what are these reports?
They're reports about all kinds of aspects about public health. They've been published for decades without interruption, even during government shutdowns. The first week that the Trump administration took office, they halted those reports as part of this external pause that they imposed on federal health agencies. Finally, last week, the CDC was able to publish those weekly scientific reports, but not the 3 ones that were supposed to come out on bird flu 2 weeks before.
And so what does that mean? Like, what is information that would have otherwise been publicized that didn't come out because of this decision?
So this is information that the CDC puts out for researchers, clinicians, all the folks that rely on this public health information to help them do their jobs, whether to watch for sickness or make sure to check people for certain kinds of symptoms. So these 3 bird flu studies were the latest information that the CDC had about what's happening with the virus, who's infected. But those reports did not come out last week when they resumed publication of these weekly reports.
Why didn't they come out?
I think the Trump administration has been pretty silent about bird flu and the need to scale up surveillance because experts think that drawing attention to outbreaks or infections may be seen as bad for business and bad for politics. And the need to be publicly communicating about risks to people who are hospitalized or risks to workers and others who are in close contact with dairy cattle and poultry, that is not a cool thing for the Trump administration right now.
And before we go on, I just want to point out here, from what I understand of your reporting, that a spokesperson for the CDC provided no comment for your reporting on this. But getting back to that question of price, though, what could the Trump administration or the government do to address that, to make it so that a few months from now, we are not paying $7, $8, $9 for a dozen eggs?
So the best way to control a virus, true for any virus, is really good surveillance and testing and making people aware. And you don't see very much of that in this administration. It's not been discussed. There haven't been any press briefings. And separately, the Trump administration has muzzled the health agencies from having any kind of external communications, except if it's mission critical. Now, they did say they would allow the CDC, that's the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which monitors outbreaks and is responding to bird flu, to update their website if there are additional human cases.
What are other things that are being done to stop the spread of bird flu right now? And what are things that can be done?
So some of the things that can be done to help contain this virus have been put in place, but it's been incredibly difficult because there was a lot of industry pushback. The Biden administration did put in place a national milk testing strategy in December. But this strategy is useful because it tells you where the virus is, because it's testing milk, raw milk coming in from the farms. And as a result of this testing, the USDA last week announced that they found a version of the bird flu virus to be infecting dairy cows in Nevada. This is significant because up until now, the version of the virus that has been infecting all the herds in the United States is different than the one they found in Nevada. And they only found the one in Nevada because they were testing the raw milk, which goes to tell you that surveillance is really key, and the officials have to be really pushing it proactively because then you have a better idea of where the virus is. If you don't know where the virus is, you cannot contain it.
And then what about vaccines? Like, is there any potential for vaccinating either the chickens and the cows or vaccinating ourselves?
So during the Biden administration, a lot of effort was placed on this measure. We have these things called vaccine candidates, where they determine whether what we have in the government's stockpile, those candidates would work against this particular virus. And they determined that it would. But of course, it takes time to get everything built up to make it become a vaccine.
So it's possible, or it seems feasible at this point, that there could be a bird flu vaccine.
Oh, yes. That was worked on up in, the Biden administration is working on it. I forget how many doses we have, several million doses. But under the new administration, this is the responsibility for the ASPR, which stands for the Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response, which is a division of Health and Human Services Department. I'm not sure where that stands.
So, Lena, thinking ahead about what's to come, what's your outlook on both the safety aspect and this concern about the spread of this virus, and also the economic part of this and prices of eggs?
Well, I'm going to go tomorrow morning and get another dozen eggs. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I already have 2 dozen eggs in my fridge.
You're one of these hoarders who's driving up the price for everyone else. Are you really going to eat all these eggs in the next week?
In order to be on top of this, because H5N1 is a potential pandemic threat. Do we know whether it will cause a pandemic? At some point, maybe. We don't know. But you cannot sort of sit back and wait for it to start making people sick very quickly. Already you can see that the virus has some mutations that could give it potentially a better chance of doing bad things, spreading more easily among humans. It's not there yet. But in order to sort of stay on top of it, you have to do the surveillance. You have to be incentivizing farmers to do more. And you have to be talking about it also publicly so that if you have a backyard flock, you are taking a lot of care when you're dealing with your chickens. And people need to understand when they are sick and they go to the hospital to make sure that the hospital is testing them, if they're hospitalized for influenza, that it's not H5.
Lena, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Martine. It's always a delight to be on this show.
Lena Sun covers public health and infectious disease for The Post. That's it for today's episode of Post Reports. Thanks for listening. If you're looking for another great show to listen to, I have a recommendation for you. The opinion section at The Post has its own podcast. It's called Impromptu, and you can hear Post Opinions columnists having honest, thoughtful conversations about the cultural debates we can't stop thinking about. You can find Impromptu wherever you listen to podcasts. Today's show was produced by Ariel Plotnick with help from Rennie Svirnovsky. It was mixed by Sam Baer and edited by Lucy Perkins. Thanks also to Lynn Bowie. I'm Martine Powers. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from The Washington Post.
Can I do my rooster? No.
What is your rooster?